Here we go. Panama. What country controlled Panama? Let's go take your quick one on. Yeah, Colombia. And there was a fight for freedom, and the brave Panamanians overturned years of Colombian tyranny. Who engineered the revolt? The U.S. and Buena Varela stole fair and square. But the big problem was right away. They could not figure out how to get through the mountains, a very high peak in the middle, to make massive blocks. No one had ever tried anything like this. It ended up costing significantly more than what they thought. And all the Americans that they sent down to work immediately, that first summer, immediately started catching yellow fever, malaria, and dropping like flies. Malaria, weak, can kill, but the big thing is weakened, can't work. Yellow fever, just a horrible disease, just like the Spanish-American War. But Walter Goethals was sent down for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and he reorganized the building. Heavy use of massive steam crane or steam shovels and lots of dynamite. We're able to cut through the mountains, making 5 massive blocks, dredging the Gatun River, and it took a while, but still, he could do little if they couldn't figure out where yellow fever came from. Where does yellow fever come from? Swamp gas and aliens. We all know that. No, they didn't know swamp gas. Was it bad air? They weren't sure. But 2 Army doctors, Walter Reed, who was in Havana, which makes sense because of the Spanish-American War, and Gorgas in Panama, when they working separately, then got together, realized that it was spread by mosquitoes. And once that happened, if you get rid of standing water, or at least limit it, you're not going to get rid of mosquitoes, but you might lessen the effects. And once that happened, the building could begin. The U.S. Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. is Walter Reed Hospital. And it's kind of amazing how once you start getting the snowball of germ science in the late 19th century, then all of a sudden everything began to take off with science. We're still, 35 years from antibiotics, but things are moving fast. And so it took a few years, but they did build the canal. This would be American territory to the end of the century. So this is part of the United States, even though it's cutting through the middle of Panama. And canal, they had to build a railroad, which is right next to it for supply. It's a very limited width, and I'll show you how narrow it is when they started getting bigger and bigger ships. Right now, the big super tankers and super cargo ships can't fit through it, but Panama has completed a bigger canal next to it, but can't really work right now. There's some issues with it. Teddy Roosevelt went down there. There he is sitting in his steam shovel. Like white suits and gray suits were very popular. In fact, they were really popular for men all the way till the early 1960s. Television. They didn't look good on black and white TV. And that would begin the shift to navy blue suits. But back here, he never actually left the United States territory proper. First president to leave the continental United States, but he was on board a cruiser, and he got off the ship very carefully in the canal zone, so it would still be U.S. territory. He was the first president to ever leave the borders of the United States and step foot in another country while serving as president. Anyone know? It was right after World War I. Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, right after World War I. So, how did they get rid of the mosquitoes? By the way, that's Goethals right there. They did, huh? DEET wasn't invented yet. Say it again. Yeah, then they just use, they could spray other stuff on it now, but back then they just simply sprayed oil on it. But it did the same thing. There they are just spraying oil. So it did the same thing. It basically killed everything in them. So they couldn't get oxygen inside, so the larvae died. So they just went to every swamp and they sprayed oil on it. Oh. I know. Yes, it did alleviate the problem of yellow fever dramatically, and at the same time, I know what it's going to do to everything that lived in there. So, they was built and finished in 1914. That is the USS Iowa, a battleship that was made during World War II. And by then, it had to be far too narrow, much more narrow than it would like to build a battleship. Look how tight it is to fit in the canal, to get through the locks. After the war, the United States started making super aircraft carriers, super carriers, and they're just too big to have to go around. And now the super tankers and super cargo ships won't fit through. And one more thing, the reason why the new canal isn't working, there's such a drought here that Lake Gatun is so shallow that they might even have to shut down the regular canal. It's that much of a drought right now. Yeah. 1914. In fact, it was finished just when what event was starting? World War I. Yeah. I want to go to the canal. I've never been there. I know people have gone through it. I think it'd be really fun to go up the locks. The massive doors in the locks would be great. Yeah.
So if it's not wide enough and they're building a new canal, why wouldn't they just widen the old one?
Oh, why would they widen the old one?
Yes.
Because they don't want to shut down the canal.
Oh, they want to keep going. That's it.
Yeah. And so they can widen the one next to it. So eventually they're going to run two canals. Huh? Yeah. I mean, it's going to further debit, that area is now kind of a dead zone for things, but it's horrible, yeah. Has anyone gone through the canal? Field trip? The little yellow bus go through it? We can dig our own canal.
Yeah, here it works.
There was talk about digging a canal, and I am not making this up. We're talking canals, so I'm going to tell you, to dig a canal from the Yukon down to California for water.
Oh.
And they seriously talked about it. There's no water in California. It's all it's a little salty. Need a lot of energy. So, jumping right to here. Taft's dollar diplomacy then. So let's get to this really quick. Taft would take over. It's still big stick diplomacy, but it's more promoting American business. And here he is, go invest in Latin America with a full faith of the government and its military. We're still going to go in, but it's trying to encourage stability. Instead of constant invasion, stability. Okay? And they would control via debt. So they encourage countries to borrow money, knowing that any country that's reliant upon extractive industries or food or cash crops, all it takes is one bad year and they're in debt. Much like farmers are. Much like Montana is in a lot of ways. And so, if they encourage them to take loans out when they have a bad year and can't pay it back, we could say, we'll help you pay back your debt, but then you must do this, 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 and this, which is easier than invading and it's economic imperialism. Yeah. Yeah, by getting them to borrow money from American banks. And this is going to be the norm for years. What's that? Up to no good? Okay. What about Asia? A couple things about talking about Asia. And here's from another one from Judge Magazine, and Uncle Sam. And this is implying that the reason the United States took Philippines is to get into the lucrative China trade. And China, which was this glorious empire 200 years before, by the 19th century was an absolute free fall. By the early or the late 19th century into the 20th century, just in free fall. The empire was in decline. It was led by it's called the Emperor Dowager, and it was corrupt. They couldn't really control the country, but everybody wanted that lucrative China trade. This is what Asia looked like in 1900. So you have the Russian Empire in competition between Russia and Japan here. Japan took the island of Formosa. What island is this today? What do we call it? Taiwan. French Indochina. What three countries, French Indochina?
Laos, Vietnam, and
Cambodia. Look at the massive size of British India. And one more thing. The legacy of the 17th century, the Dutch were really powerful. They had all of Indonesia, which is a massive country. What's the fourth most populous country in the world today? And it's the largest majority Muslim country in the world. And so this is a huge place with lots of oil. What's the largest Muslim population in the world in the country, but it's not the majority population?
United States.
Not even close.
Okay.
What's the most populous country in the world? India. India has the largest Muslim population in the world, but it's not the majority Muslim. The largest majority Muslim country is Indonesia. Anybody know the second largest Muslim majority country? Pakistan. Then Bangladesh. So, we wanted that lucrative China trade. And don't forget, the United States had already done that Chinese, even though the law was actually written as the Oriental Exclusion Act. Oriental is this kind of legacy of medieval maps. All the maps in medieval Europe align oriented to the center. The center of the universe in medieval maps, Jerusalem. So they oriented to the east. And that's how it just, east meant orient. So that's where it came from. Not really any real meaning behind Oriental. So, and then there were 2 opium wars. Most people think of, and correctly, that this was Britain's effort to decimate China to force in British trade, especially of opium. But the United States and France both participated, the French especially, but the US helped the British. And the Chinese were defeated and they were forced to sign a bunch of treaties. So write down unequal treaties. Bunch of unequal treaties. Opening up everybody to exploit China. And that's going to lead directly to the Boxer Rebellion. So you have all this economic imperialism because of the unequal treaties, especially by the great powers. They're literally carving up China, not quite colonial imperialism, but pretty close. There's also a lot of missionary activity. So what we have for the missionary activity is you have mostly Protestant Christians from Britain and the United States. And it had a big element of kind of social Darwinistic views towards religion. And it infuriated, the missionary activity infuriated so many of the Chinese. Basically, there was a lot of, you're going to hell unless you convert. So it really infuriated them. And so this is going to lead to this uprising. Now, the Empress Dowager could not support it. So it was done as a secret uprising against foreign influence, taking missionaries and trade enclaves in big cities. They disguised it in these martial arts clubs that were known as the Peaceful and Harmonious Fist. Now, the British had no idea. In fact, nobody in the United States would have known what martial arts were in 1900. But what did the British do? They boxed. So they're hitting each other, so they must be boxers, so the Boxer Rebellion. They attacked missionaries. There were these trade enclaves, foreign legations in various towns, especially the capital of Beijing. And the embassies were in this walled section of Beijing, which everybody then, outside of China, called Peking because the British mispronounced it, and that's where we got our language. When I was your age, I still called it Peking. And Guangzhou was Canton. Thank you, British. Well, 55 days, the foreign legations were surrounded in this walled city. Every great power, everyone sent troops to liberate the walled legation. That includes the United States, Britain, France, Austria, a brand new and very aggressive Germany, the United States, and Japan. So here it shows US, Japanese, and British forces, but they all forced their way into Beijing and liberated it. And here is a great map justifying this, a great cartoon, I'm sorry, for the United States. Here's McKinley and Uncle Sam, and it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What document's that from? Mm-hmm. And under treaty rights, we won our exploited treaties to take advantage of China. Now, that's where we'll quit right there, obviously, but let me tell you one thing. China has never forgotten the Boxer Rebellion. Ever. In class, if you're a Chinese student, you're taught about the Boxer Rebellion, what those foreign powers did, and they invaded, and they hate you. And they still hate you, and they might do what again? You're coming back. Oh, if you got a book, just go and put it underneath it. Yeah, I just want to check. No, we're going to talk about it. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great 3-day weekend. I don't think there'll be any more than a foot of snow tonight. It's not supposed to snow. But I know, darn it. Goodbye, everybody. Good luck. Why are you going to Washington, D.C.? Why are you going to Washington, D.C.? You told me about this coming. Yeah, sure. That'd be awesome.
Never coming back.
See ya. Gorillas?
Yeah.
There are a couple good songs.
Couple? Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't know
I
what
like
that
Navy Days. That's my favorite.
It's okay.
Huh?
I like Navy Days.
That's cool. That's one of the things when you'll find out about music. Your music that you like when you're about 18 or 19, 17 through 19 or so, that'll be the music you like. So I know they have a couple songs, I kind of like them, but I'm in what everybody wants to square dance. That's all we do. Lots of just hitting rocks together. That's music to me.
I like Johnny Cash.
And Johnny Cash. I never asked how to do this.
Back to where we were.
Look.
The sun is up, the sky is blue. I'm so happy this clear sky. Cloudy makes me decide. So I thought you better start raining. It's a Beatles song. The sun is up, the sky is blue. It's a song from the White Album. Hey, I'm going to give you some extra credit. And also I said I would give you half the period to work. Half the period, what did we say, 30 seconds?